And so now what we'll do, we're going to do the procedure start with external pneumatic power. First of all, we're going to get rid of all the equipment. So we're going to close the doors. Main doors as well. Getting ready for departure. So, there is the possibility. So if you have a broken APU, and so you have no APU bleed air coming from the APU, then you would have to start one engine on the ground at the gate with external bleed air. And that usually is a little vehicle or with a little cart with a APU installed on it. You won't see the APU. Usually it's hidden under a casing. And then the ground air, there's two connectors down here. One is for the air conditioning. So you have... Oh, let me just turn that around. So there's two connections here below the aircraft. And one is for the air conditioning. So that's air-conditioned air going in. And the other one is a high-pressure air. And that... flight. Yeah, Brennelt. Right, so high-pressure air going in here. And that is fed directly into the bleed ducts. And you'll see that in a second once we connect everything. But before you can connect the ground high-pressure air, you have to go through the checklist, meaning that one of the very important things, or let me ask you, what happens if you actually feed in bleed air right now? So now we have no APU bleed air, and if you feed the high pressure air from the ground, what would happen?
Autopilot.
Docs, thank you for the follow, welcome.
Autopilot.
So this is for the technical experts here. I think Azubiko will probably know. Yeah, W. The thing is that the bleed air will feed directly into the packs. And so the packs will actually start running. The thing is, external air is polluted. It doesn't have the air quality, it doesn't have the filters that has the APU in the aircraft. So you would probably get exhausts from the external power source, external air, into the cabin. And so you could actually pollute the air in the cabin. So the first thing on the checklist you're going to have to do is to switch off the packs. So the checklist says packs 1 and 2 off. And that is to prevent contamination of the packs. Then, before the start, APU bleed off, that is off. Engine bleed, both engines off. So no bleed from the engines when they start up. And then one very important thing to do is to open the crossbleed. If we don't open the crossbleed, then the ground air won't be able to reach the starter of engine 2. And the normal procedure is as follows. Normally, the card would be here on the left side of the aircraft, because that's the connection on the left-hand side here. And then, so in order to avoid endangering any personnel here on this side, is to start the engine 2 first. So let's clear everything. Looks clear as well. So the next thing on the checklist says clear to start. It says start engine 2 first. So we'll do that. So we go into the menu here. Engine failure mid-flight, wouldn't in your APU be a problem? No, because the APU, the other generator, electric generator, will still supply the whole system with electric power. And so the APU would be a backup, but you don't need it in flight. Right, so we go to the options, external controls. Also, of course, the external power is still connected because the APU can't deliver. Yeah, well, if you need a restart in flight, APU is not working. You can only do that via windmilling. Yeah, so that's the only down case in that scenario. So true, you couldn't do a APU air started assisted engine start. Yeah. So now what we would say is to the ramp agent or the guy connected to the headset, we would tell him that we are ready for ground air, and so that way he's going to connect the air, and now we can see that the PSI is already rising, and so the whole bleed system now, both engine bleeds, would be able to start. Right, so we have 34 PSI, looks good. And then we just use the normal start procedure for the engine start. So we're gonna first of all, before we do anything else, switch on the beacon, and we are of course going to read our before start checklist. Just need to get that out. So, before start checklist, cockpit preparations have been completed. Signs are on auto. Fuel quantity 4,980 kilograms. Altimeters QNH 1017 with 1,250 feet. Then down to the line, below the line, windows, doors closed. Let me just check that. Doors are closed. The beacon is on. Parking brake, very important, is on. So before start checklist completed. So like we said, normal engine start, meaning that ignition starts. And that way we have the indication here. Just make sure that you have enough bleed pressure. Yeah, so more than 25 PSI. And then we're just going to say engine 2 start. So we have N2 rotation. There we can hear the engines. And we have fuel flow and EGT. So, engine is available, meaning that it's stabilized at idle. And so we continue with the checklist. After engine 2 is started, and it says if the crossbleed engine start procedure is used for engine 1, and that is the case, request the removal of external pneumatic power unit. So we will tell him to disconnect the air starter. And that's what we'll do. Then the next thing we're going to do is packs 1 and 2 on. 1 and 2. And then engine 2 bleed on. And after that we should do the crossbleed engine start procedure. Now this crossbleed start procedure I have actually uploaded onto the Dropbox account. So you can go through the checklist with me if you want. So let's just have a look. So we have the ground air now disconnected, and so the bleed air coming from engine 2 is now supplying both sides and both packs as well. And that is because we have left the crossbleed valve open. If we do that, put that on auto, then the valve will actually close and then shut off the left side. So now we wouldn't be able to do the engine start because the starter of the left engine won't get any bleed air. So that remains open for now. So the crossbleed engine start. Now there's a very important item here to be very careful about. One of the things is you have to be parked with parking brakes set. In our case, we're not going to do any pushback, so we're just going to taxi out with a right turn, so we can start the engine here at the position, which is quite nice. And in order to have enough pressure for the engine start, we'll need about 30 psi minimum before we even open the start valve. And during the engine start, we're going to have to maintain at least 25 psi. Otherwise, you might get a hung engine start. In auto, if the APU bleed is supplying the system, then that's the only case that the valve opens automatically. Reynolds, right? Okay, so before start, APU bleed off. That is off. Engine bleed, running engine, which is engine 2, check on. It is on. Engine bleed, receiving engine, that's engine 1, off. Crossbleed open. It is open. Now, when cleared to start, check that the area behind and in front of the engine is clear. Very important, because we are going to increase the thrust on the right engine. And so if anybody stands in the front of the engine or near the engine, he might get sucked in. And also at the rear of the engine, we're going to increase thrust to about 35–40%. You will make sure that behind the engine everything is clear as well. So we increase the thrust, so everything's clear, increase the thrust on engine 2 to about 35%. And then we have enough pressure to start the engine. And it says engine, normal start procedure. So we say engine 1, start. And now, like I said, the bleed air from engine 2 is going to the engine 1. And we have to make sure that the bleed pressure is at least 25 psi for the engine start. So we monitor that, and then we can see N2 is rising already. So we have ignition and fuel flow, HT is rising. Right, it's available. So we continue on the checklist. After engine available, thrust lever supplying engine idle. It's idle. Crossbleed auto. Engine bleed receiving engine on, and then PEX check on. And that's it. So that is how you do the engine start with ground air, external air, and then the crossbleed start in the Airbus A320. And after that, you do the normal after start flow. So we're going to tell our ground crew to disconnect the ground power, and then we just continue with the flow.